Now, last week, Kenya decided to withdraw the 1,000 Kenyan shilling notes from circulation by the 1st of October this year. Now, the decision has faced strong headwinds from the private sector, with the central bank now facing 2 legal suits over the decision. The central bank maintains that the decision is to deal with concerns about illicit financial flows and money laundering. Christine Miungai joined me earlier on to speak on this. Now, she's a writer and a curator of The Elephant from Nairobi. Take a look.
This is something that started with the 2010 constitution that mandated this change of the currency. So initially, the origins of the process go back to the promulgation of this constitution that Kenya is living under right now. There's a lot of speculation about why now. Why not 5 years ago? Why not 2 years ago? And I don't think I would be in the position to give an answer to that, except to say that it's a decision that the central bank has taken at this moment, and that is being received with a lot of questions about what the intention is. How does it fit into the war against corruption that has been talked about? How does it fit into the other bigger political issues that are happening in Kenya right now? Everyone is looking to see how this will unfold. But there is a constitutional provision that mandated this change, and it's coming up at a time when political realignments are happening, when there's a lot of, I would say, goodwill or action, ostensibly, against corruption, and people are saying that this will make a difference. I have my own kind of view about that.
And we've seen that the Central Bank of Kenya is currently facing 2 legal suits over this decision. Could you shed more light on this?
Yeah, well, the 2 suits are kind of related. One of them was filed by a legislator of the East Africa Legislative Assembly, IALA, who termed the directive as unconstitutional because it violates certain articles of the Constitution, specifically Article 231, and that it was executed without public participation. It just seemed to come from above, just a directive that really, according to the suit, did not really involve the public. And the second one is also related to the same, and it was filed by Okia Omtata, an activist, and he's challenging the rollout of the new currency, saying that it wasn't properly gazetted, and that secondly, he's challenging the inclusion of an image of the former president Jomo Kenyatta on the new currency notes. The Constitution specifically said that the new currency should not contain the portrait of any president, but instead should have symbols, national symbols. But the central bank has said that what they've included on the currency is actually not a portrait, it's a statue. Which I think is a very kind of clever way of evading the issue, that there still is an image of an individual on the currency who was a former president, which the Constitution specifically prohibits. The image of Jomo Kenyatta that is on the new currency is that of a statue, which is at the Kenyatta International Conference Center, but the suit is really challenging the inclusion of Jomo Kenyatta, period.
Yeah, we've seen it has been received with mixed emotions, not only in Kenya, but also across the border. We've seen Uganda and Tanzania also having a stand and freezing the exchange of currency. Now, what impact will this have on the trade when you look at the cross-border trade?
Yeah, it will definitely create a lot of hiccups and hitches that are likely to hit, small traders, SMEs, and all kinds of ordinary business people who do cross-border trade. It's likely to be a challenge, because from the memo that I have seen that the Bank of Uganda and Bank of Tanzania are referring to, they're saying if you have Kenyan currency in Uganda and Tanzania, you have to travel to Kenya to change it, which is really going to be, I think it's an added cost, I would say, to business people. But this implementation process is still very much kind of up in the air. There's still a number of months that this whole process will be rolled out. And there might be some other instructions that are given to the banks that are in Tanzania or in Uganda or let's say in the East African region to help this process along. But I would say as of now, the central bank directives are not cast in stone. I believe that if they see, or that everything is kind of could be changed depending on how the issue is being received on the ground. Just taking the example of what happened in India with their demonetization process, which really hit poor people the hardest. The central bank says that they were watching the situation in India and they have learned from the lessons, and they would do the most that they can to kind of cushion ordinary citizens and ordinary business people. But I guess it's just really wait and see how this process unfolds over the next few months.
And why are some members of the private sector skeptical about this move by the Central Bank of Kenya?
I wouldn't say it's the skepticism is really coming from private sector specifically. I would say that a lot of the questions are really coming with how it intersects with the so-called war on corruption. People are saying that this, powerful government figures and, governors and people like that have stashed a lot of money in cash in their houses, in safe houses and that sort of thing, and that this directive forces them to bring this money back into circulation, and that this will be a way to curb corruption or to catch, people who have illegally stashed money without, the proper kind of documentation and, without the proper legal channels. But I would say that I think that's a bit of kind of wishful thinking. I believe that there might be some kind of low-level people who may be caught up in knots about this. But in my view, I think the really powerful people are totally not caught unawares by this and have already made their moves. They've already made a way through for themselves. And I really believe it's going to be low-level people and ordinary business people who might catch the brunt of this.
Yeah, and
depending, of course, on how the changeover happens.
Yeah. When we look at the changeover, the central bank has given a window of 120 days. Now, do you think that this time is enough, especially when bigger population in Kenya is in rural areas?
Well, I wouldn't really say if it's enough time or not enough time. A lot of going by the lessons of India, this is a difficult process to execute, and it's hard to say, to give an affirmative answer on how much time is enough time. It really just depends on the structures that are in place, and it depends on how the process is rolled out, right from the top, from the central bank, cascading downwards into the banks, into the formal sector, into the formal financial sector, and how it reaches the informal sector. If the thing that catches poor people and ordinary citizens the hardest is kind of these hardline directives that, let's say by August 30th or September 1st, that your money is invalid, right? That really causes a stampede, for these services that may not be able to absorb the kind of demand that will be there. I would say that the more prudent thing is kind of to roll this out, not with a hard deadline like that, but really to give time for the money to be phased out, and that the phasing out process is done in a way that cushions the least powerful people, that doesn't really privilege the people who already have access to these formal financial spaces, but takes into account the people who don't.